Hello everyone and welcome to another video. I hope that you are very, very well, and today we are going to be discussing classic literature and specifically how to start reading classics if that's not something you are used to. I have a very fresh cup of tea. The Jane Austen mug is back out to fit the theme of the video. That's what the steam in front of my face is. I still have a cold, so this is medicinal. So I have here 5 tips for anyone wanting to start reading classics, to get into classics. A few little tips and tricks for you. Tip number 1, why do you want to read more classics? This is always, if ever anyone is like, oh, I wish I read more of this, I wish I read more of that, I wish I read more, just read more. Why? And I don't mean that as in like, why would you do that? I mean that as in, if you can identify why you want to do that, you will find the route to it much easier. It might be that there's all these books that you've heard amazing things about, but kind of intimidate you because they're long and use old, outdated language. It might be that you want to learn more about the history of literature and books and experience that in the same way that you would go to an art gallery, and that's why you want to read more. It might be you've been assigned them by school or university. It might be that you feel like you should read these books, so you're going to. If you can put your finger on why it is that you're reading these books, it will be much easier to find the right books for you, to find the right approach for you. And yeah, I think if you can find that reason, it'll be much, much easier. Tip number 2, classics isn't a genre. I know, I said it. It's not a genre. Classics just means it was written a long time ago and a lot of people think it's very good. That doesn't necessarily mean it's very good. I've hated some classics, and judging by the Goodreads ratings, so have a lot of other people. I'm looking at you, Moby Dick. But here's the thing, classics come in all different genres, just like books written today. So read books in your favourite genre and you will enjoy them more. If you hate realistic, day-to-day, everything's terrible books, you probably won't like Charles Dickens. If you're a big sci-fi fan, read some Mary Shelley or some Jules Verne or some H.G. Wells. If you're a romance fan, read some Jane Austen. If you are a serial, everyday life person, read some Charles Dickens. If you love mysteries, read Sherlock Holmes, read some Agatha Christie books. Whatever your preferred genre is, or your preferred genres are, go for that genre, because classics isn't a genre. There are genres that span back through hundreds of years. So go for whatever your favourite genre is and read that. If we stop thinking of classics as this monolith of this sort of genre of book and just start thinking of it as a way to describe books that are old, then it'll be much easier to find the right books for you. I'm so full of cold, I'm very, very sorry. Every N sound is just like, Tip number 3 is a controversial one, and that is to watch the film first. I am shocked, frankly, and if you're on BookTube, chances are you feel the same way, that you should always read the book first. However, often one of the biggest barriers that we feel, one of the things that intimidates us about classic novels is the writing, that it's unusual and it's not what we're used to and it feels antiquated and it can be quite hard to follow the plot while you're also sort of deciphering the writing as you go along. If you've watched the film, you already know the plot, so you can kind of hit the beats along the way. It's like following your journey on like Google Street View before you set out to do it. You know? It just means you know exactly where you're going and you can go, oh yeah, I've seen this bit before, I know where I am. It won't be for everyone, but I don't know, I sometimes find if I watch the film, and also the film can get me more excited to read the book because I know what's coming up. So yes, pros and cons. Tip number 4, experience it as it's meant to be experienced. This sounds very pretentious, but what I mean by this is, of course Shakespeare is a slog to sit down and read. It's not meant to be sat down and read. It's a play. Of course, reading a whole book of Yeats poetry is going to feel slow and repetitive. You're not meant to sit down and read the whole thing from start to finish. So if you're finding it a slog, you want to read it, but you're really struggling, switch it up, especially with plays. Watch the film. Just watch the film. That's closer to how it was supposed to be experienced than sat and reading the book. And you can always read along and highlight things that you jump out, or tab them, or fold the page over, whatever it is. You can, hybrid if you like. You could listen to an audiobook, so you get kind of a radio play experience. Poems are meant to be read aloud, not read just on a page, or they're meant to be read in isolation. They may not have been published as a collection initially. So I think just bear that in mind as you're approaching a new scary book that's got, a lot of dense language, that is quite intimidating, that we can watch the play. There are loads of, especially Shakespeare, so many different versions of every play. So many. And yes, some of them are truly, truly inspired. The productions out there that you can watch online. So yes, that is my tip, especially for Shakespeare, but for all plays and poetry, switch it up. Read it as it was meant to be read. Don't feel like you have to sit there and read it as a book. And finally, tip number 5, find a good edition. If you're reading a translated book, finding a good translation is 90% of the battle to getting in that book. The first time I tried to read a Jules Verne book, I thought I hated it. I was like, I can't get on with this. I hate the writing style. I thought I would love Jules Verne, and no, I don't. I hate it. Then I twigged. It's a translation issue. So then I tried... What was that book I tried? I can't remember which book it was, that very first one. But the second one I tried was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And I loved it. Yes, it had that kind of classical, traditional writing style. And I was reading the original English translation. So I got that kind of sense of it being a classic. But I also lost a lot of the political messaging because that was very deliberately lost in translation. Then the next book I read by Jules Verne was Journey to the Centre of the Earth, and it was a completely different translation, very modern, very simplistic, like chalk and cheese from the previous one I'd read, and read much more like a kind of middle grade adventure book. So translation is everything. If you're not sure, places like Reddit have really good discussion threads. Lots of booksellers have very strong opinions on this. If you go into a bookshop, especially one that specialises in classics and antiquarian books, etc., they will have very strong opinions about which are the best ones to go for. When it comes to reading books in their original language, then find an edition that has a notes section or that's annotated. University bookshops are really good places for these. I have a selection of Alma classics, I think the editions are called, and first of all they've got stunning covers, but also they've got really good list of notes at the back, just to let you know if there are any turns of phrase or words that are specific to the era or the place. They just unpack that a bit, so they kind of draw back the curtain on some of the things that we may miss as a modern reader. So those are 5 tips from me for starting to read classics or getting more into them if that is something that you are interested in. If you have any tips for anyone, leave them in the description. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Ta-ra for now.